concern is that as a nation, when it comes to climate change, we've just decided we're going to wing it. We're not going to have a climate change policy. We're not going to have an energy policy. We're going to hope that if it really is a problem, and I think our last speaker might have revealed why the fact that this is a problem is decreasingly on the public's radar screen. If it is a problem, there'll be some technological solution in the future that will solve this, and maybe it'll just be third world countries that'll feel the effect of it in the future. But I'm an urbanist, so where this problem hits me is that US cities are so far behind where they need to be on addressing the climate change problem. We do have more than 1,000 cities in the country have signed the US Conference of Mayors Climate Change Agreement. And what that does is commit these cities to meeting the Kyoto Protocol targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it also commits those mayors to really making a case to their state representatives and to Congress to pass the needed climate and energy legislation to help them do what they need to do to reduce carbon emissions in their cities. But a few bike trails, bike rental stations, a stepped-up recycling program, a few building design standards are not going to get us where we need to be as a nation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Even the top US cities on climate change in the United States, and I would argue Boston is one of them, but even the top cities, say Portland, that just about everyone agrees is the top city, aren't coming close to meeting the climate change goals for emissions reductions that they had set. So what drives my question is, or research is why? Why is that the case? Why can't the cities meet the goals that they've established? And in looking around the world at what other cities are doing, I would argue that the top European cities are far ahead of where the top US cities are on this front. So again, the question that drives my research is why? I've been studying a set of about 5 to 7 European cities over the last 4 years and have some answers. So let's start at the top. At the European Union level, there's several mandates that require member states to reduce their emissions, participate in a cap-and-trade system, and there's a lot of funding around to help member states and cities meet these goals. At the member state level of the EU, there are also many programs and goals. So I can't underestimate the importance of the layers of policy above what a city is doing that are helping those European cities. And as we know, we don't have that in the United States. And we have a slate of presidential candidates that even question the existence of climate change and a public that's not too far behind. So it's not likely to happen soon. I'm not totally hopeless on this front, but that's not the topic that I'm speaking of today. I think there's something else going on besides the levels of government support. It's an approach to urban planning that I see in many of the European cities I'm looking at that's driving their superior performance. There's 3 elements to this. The first one is integration. You can't just think in silos. Here's our transportation policy, here's our building policy, here's our energy policy. Those have to be integrated to get the biggest bang for the buck in addressing climate change. A second one is a willingness to experiment. What I see mainly in the United States is the opposite. Why? Because mayors are so ruled by an election cycle that you don't dare want to do something that's going to fail because it'll come to haunt you in the next election. And we see that in so many examples, the most recent one in the United States being Solyndra, that we read about again and again and again in the paper. The Department of Energy has funded hundreds of companies in renewable energy. One of those loans goes bad, and that's all we hear about. Throw out the whole process. And the third one is illustrated in my title, an approach that focuses on a grand vision. What is it, if we were really going to reach these goals, that we could do, versus one I see that dominates in the United States is, let's go after the low-hanging fruit, and we'll increasingly be able to meet our targets. So let's take a look at what that looks like to see these three elements. I'm going to start in Freiburg, Germany. Freiburg in the 1970s, this is a college town in the southwest corner of Germany, a town of about a little over 200,000 people, was going to be situated right next to a nuclear power plant. There was a lot of public dissent. The power plant didn't happen, but they had to decide, what are we going to be for if we're not for nuclear energy? And they came up with this idea, the grand vision, we're going to be Solar Freiburg. That's what we're going to be known for. And what were the elements of that? The same kind of things we see going on in cities in the United States. Conservation, use of new technologies, and renewable energy. So the city said, every building in our city, every government-owned building is going to have some element of solar power. And we want, when people come into our city, we want them to know we're the solar city. So come into the train station, that's what you see. Sends the message, something different is going on in this city. Now, Freiburg, being a historic city, has a lot of old buildings. And one of the things they had to figure out, as you see over here, is just how do you integrate solar technology in a way that it doesn't ruin the historical integrity of buildings. So this is an example at the top of how they did that. But at the same time, moving on this front, every new building, we're going to cover them. So you see the Freiburg Stadium has solar panels on its roof. Again, the public sees daily how that Freiburg is the solar city. Then another grand vision, the city is a very rapidly growing one, decided to build a whole new district of the city to accommodate that growth, and in doing so said, okay, we're going to show how we can create this eco-district, this neighborhood of our city to incorporate all these goals. And so what does that look like? Well, this is Vauban, the city that's been built. Every single building has been fitted with solar panels in the construction. This is a back view of the daycare center. Why do I show you the daycare center? Well, part of what they did in this area in integrating all the elements, when I talked about the integration, was say, we don't want people to drive back and forth from this area. So we're going to use some carrots and sticks here, policy-wise. No one's allowed to park in the neighborhood. If you want to own a car, you can. You can put it in the parking garage outside the neighborhood. It'll cost you about $25,000 for that. If you want the privilege, you pay for it. If you don't, we will give you a free pass for public transportation. We will set up new bike lanes for you to use to get back and forth and make it very easy to live in Vauban without owning a car. But you have to think broader than that. Why do people choose to use a car even when public transportation is available? It's something called trip chaining. On your way home, you're going to stop at the grocery store. On your way there, you're going to drop your children off at childcare. So part of what they did in thinking of designing the community was making sure all those assets were there. So you drop off your child at the childcare center in the Vauban neighborhood. You don't have this problem. Kind of an integrative thinking about how to do it. The other element is, this is going to be an economic development strategy. So we're not doing solar just because we're green, that's part of it, but this is going to help our economy. So they developed a policy called a feed-in tariff. says to utilities, you have to buy all of the renewable energy that's produced. You have to buy it at a set price. That price remains and goes down over 20 years. The idea, you create a stable investment environment for the industry. The other element of this was creating demand locally. So anyone who wants to put renewable energy systems in their home is subsidized, and they can sell the energy they don't use back into the grid. Local policy that helped bring an industry, this is Solar Fabric in Freiburg. If you look at the back of that picture, you see it's a pretty cloudy day. So it's not that Germany was a natural here in terms of the amount of sun or even the amount of wind it has, but what happened in Germany, the federal government looked at this unique set of policies that Freiburg and other cities were using and took it national. And as a result, Germany became very quickly the #1 and #2 exporter of solar and wind technology. Now, it's fighting to keep that position with China right now, but because of these policies, has really been able to connect economic development and a strategy for reducing greenhouse gas at the local level. Let's move on to Stockholm. Another one, 2 cities in Sweden, among my favorites, Stockholm and Malmö. Again, we see all 3 elements. Carrots and sticks, transportation policy, okay, dramatically increasing the number of subway lines was part of it. Reducing the cost of using the subway was part of what they did. Another thing they were very thoughtful about in Stockholm, getting at that question, why don't people use subways? A lot of people, you think of going down to the subways, the stairs smell like urine, you get there, you don't know when the train is coming. Here, working with local artists, really developed a strategy for making the subway stations wonderful places to be. Now, everyone doesn't look like that, but some of them do, and the others look pretty good in comparison. But the integration part, linking that to a strategy of using other modes of transportation. So some of the elements in designing the bikeway systems you see here and here and here, always a physical separation between the vehicular traffic and the bicycler. The biggest factor in getting people on bicycles as transportation and not as recreation is you've got to feel safe. So along with doing the subway improvements, really making improvements in how the bike lanes work in the city, redesigning traffic signaling to favor bicycles were among the things that they did. So carrot, carrot in terms of subway and this, stick in transportation planning. So Stockholm developed a congestion pricing system, very unpopular. More than half of the Stockholm residents against this policy when it was put in place, so they only did it as a pilot. And when they put it in as a pilot, you can see there was a graduated pricing system. Within 1 year, it had reduced traffic in the downtown 20%. People liked it. It also, over time, has reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the center city by 14 to 20%, depending on how you measure it. So effective policy, a year later, everybody was for it, and it's still in place now. But Stockholm also had a grand vision. This is their district heating network, one of the most effective things any city can do in terms of reducing its energy consumption. Stockholm's district heating system was actually started in the 50s, and what that does is in energy production, whether you use biofuel, whether you use gas or coal, when you produce electricity, half of it is wasted. It goes out of pipe as heat energy. District heating is all about just capturing that, increasing the efficiency up to 90%. You can use it for cooling as well, and Stockholm has integrated this into its whole city. This is Very hard to read, but I'll tell you about it. The Hammarby model. So like Freiburg with Vauban, what Stockholm wanted to do was to create a grand vision. Okay, what would all this look like if we could start fresh? And so they did start fresh. They had an area of the city, Hammarby Sjöstad, that was a declining industrial area. They had the idea, 2004 Olympics, we're going to go for it and we're going to build this grand eco village. They didn't get the Olympics, but decided to go for it anyway. So this is a 340-hectare area, about a little over 840 acres, that was a brownfield site, cleared, and again, this integrated idea. Okay, we don't want people driving in and out of here, so what we're going to do is expand the subway system with the tram. It's going to have 4 stops in the neighborhood to make it very convenient to use public transportation. Then we're going to connect by ferry. Every 10 minutes, free ferry to several sections of the city. We're also going to experiment. We're going to do different kinds of solar energy, very efficient buildings within it. Another thing, this is my favorite part, is the disposal system. So what you see, whether you're going inside or out, there's 3 receptacles. Garbage trucks don't come. They go down a chute through a vacuum system. One is for recyclables, one is for organic waste, one is for everything else. So what happens once it goes to the central processing plant? Well, the combustible waste is incinerated. It comes back into the district heating system as electricity, or it comes back from the water waste also going into district heating. Also produces biogas. From the organic waste. You can do 2 things with it. One is biogas, and then the biogas comes back, and the bus system in the city of Stockholm uses that biogas. The third thing you can do with the organic waste is make compost. So the compost that's used in the parks in the city of Stockholm comes from the city's organic waste. Education is a major part of this. They have built, integrated right into the center of the community, a major glass house. It's the education center where people come to learn about the systems operating in Hammarby Sjöstad. The idea, though, is to build into the infrastructure as much as possible so that you don't have to rely on people turning down their thermostats. You don't have to rely on them running their dishwasher at night. Through technology, many of these decisions are made, so it's not that you have to be an especially green person to live in the area. So this is this shows what the area has looked like. The slide is from 2005 that was anticipating what it would look like. It is all built out to look like that now. So this Hammarby model, this grand vision of how could we integrate everything and really create an eco-community, then became the model for the rest of the city in how you develop new areas. So right now, Stockholm is in the middle of developing a much larger parcel, the Royal Seaport, using the same set of standards, using the knowledge learned from the experiments in Hammarby Sjöstad. This is a public-private partnership. It has universities, it has some of the largest corporations involved, and they're stepping it up further. So the idea is by 2030, they're going to be completely fossil-free. And the other thing they're going to do is build the infrastructure for a smart grid for the entire city by demonstrating it in this area. So they have developed this smart grid experiment where all of the harbor is going to be on it. All of the new housing development is going to be part of a smart grid experiment that will guide how the smart grid changes for the entire country of Sweden in this one simple step. I don't have time to go on to talk about Malmö, but it's much the same strategy. Integrating their planning, taking a large swath of the city, showing how that could work, setting a new standard that then becomes the standard for the entire city, but also influences standards throughout the country. So for example, building efficiency. Some of the most efficient buildings in the world are built in these two cities, influencing it at the country level. So in conclusion, it is my hope, by demonstrating the power of these kind of strategies in the United States, we can move from low-hanging fruit to a grand vision. Thank you.